It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Lisa Jefferson, the newly appointed chief of police for Rivertown, was driving down Interstate 47 in her black sedan. Lisa had always loved the quiet moments of her morning drives, and that very morning was no different. The fresh autumn breeze swept through her open windows as she cruised calmly, lost in thoughts of how to lead her team at the Rivertown Police Department. Lisa was new to the position, but certainly not new to the job. With a decade of service, she had earned her way to the top. But despite her achievements, Lisa always stayed humble, refusing to flaunt her position. As she approached exit 13, she noticed flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror. A police cruiser pulled up behind her with sirens blaring. For a moment, Lisa was confused. She wasn't speeding, her car's registration was up to date, and she hadn't made any wrong turns. She glanced at the dashboard and confirmed her speed, exactly within the limit. Still, the cruiser persisted, signaling for her to pull over. Lisa raised an eyebrow but complied, turning onto the shoulder and coming to a complete stop. She watched through her side mirror as two officers stepped out of the cruiser. They wore dark sunglasses, their uniforms crisp, and their walk brisk. One of them, a tall man with a buzz cut, tapped the side of her car window with his flashlight. Lisa rolled her window down, trying to remain calm, though she couldn't help but feel a flicker of annoyance. "Good morning, officers. Is there a problem?" she asked politely. The officer leaned in, his expression unreadable. "License and registration," he said bluntly, ignoring her question. Lisa reached for her wallet, her mind buzzing with questions. Why had they pulled her over? She handed over her license and registration without a word. The second officer, a shorter man with a gruff demeanor, stood on the other side of her car, peering in suspiciously. "What's your business here?" he asked, as though interrogating a criminal. "I'm just heading to work," Lisa replied, keeping her voice steady. The first officer, whose name tag read Officer James, took a long look at her license. His partner, Officer Grady, kept pacing around the car as if he were looking for something wrong. Lisa could sense their unease, but she couldn't pinpoint why. "You work around here?" Officer James asked, his tone a bit more aggressive than necessary. "Yes, I do," Lisa answered simply, resisting the urge to say more. She knew better than to escalate the situation. James raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "We'll see about that," he muttered under his breath as he turned to his partner. Grady gave a small nod, and without warning, the two officers started whispering to each other, their eyes darting back to her occasionally. The minutes ticked by as the officers continued their quiet conversation, leaving Lisa waiting. Her fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel, and though she wasn't afraid, she felt something wasn't right. She could feel the tension in the air. Why were they acting this way? Finally, Officer James returned to the window, his face hard and unfriendly. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Lisa blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said step out of the vehicle," James repeated. "Can you at least tell me why I'm being asked to get out?" she questioned, still trying to maintain composure. "Step out!" Now, Officer Grady barked from the passenger side, growing impatient. With no other choice, Lisa opened her door and stepped out. The two officers immediately moved closer, their hands resting on their holsters as if preparing for trouble. Lisa stood tall, her posture calm but alert. "You mind explaining what's going on here?" she asked, her voice clear but firm now. James smirked. "We got reports about a vehicle matching this description, potentially involved in illegal activity. Illegal activity? Lisa asked, incredulous. What kind of illegal activity? Officer Grady crossed his arms. We'll be the ones asking the questions. Lisa was no stranger to confrontations with authority, especially as a Black woman in America. But this felt personal. She couldn't help but wonder if they even bothered to check her license properly. Were they truly suspicious of her, or was this something else? As the officers searched her car, their smug expressions only deepened her suspicions. They were enjoying this, playing a dangerous game with someone they thought was powerless. Lisa watched them closely, but she remained silent. She knew what was coming next, and she was more than prepared for it. Nothing in the car, Officer Grady said, almost disappointed. James stepped back, his hands still on his holster. We're going to need you to come with us for questioning. For the first time, Lisa smiled. It was a small, knowing smile, one that the officers didn't understand. But they would soon. Are you sure you want to do this? Lisa asked. Both officers looked confused, but they didn't have time to respond. A black SUV pulled up behind them, and out stepped a familiar face, Deputy Chief Martin, their direct superior. Lisa, Martin called out. Is everything okay here? The officers froze, their faces draining of color as they slowly pieced it together. Lisa Jefferson wasn't just anyone. She was their new boss, the chief of police. Deputy Chief Martin's arrival was like a thunderclap in the tension-filled air. Officer James's hand instinctively dropped from his holster, and he took a half step back, his face pale as though he had just seen a ghost. Officer Grady, normally brimming with bravado, stood frozen, his arms awkwardly hanging at his sides. The realization of what they had done was starting to hit them hard. Lisa Jefferson, the very woman they had been harassing on the side of the road, wasn't just any driver. She was their superior, the newly appointed chief of police for Rivertown. Deputy Chief Martin walked over with a serious face as he glanced from Lisa to the two officers. What exactly is going on here? His voice carried a weight of authority that demanded answers. He looked directly at James and Grady, waiting for their explanation. James swallowed hard, clearly struggling to find the right words. We pulled her over because the car matched the description of a vehicle involved in suspicious activity, he stammered. Suspicious activity? Martin responded. His gaze shifted to Lisa, who stood quietly with her arms crossed, watching the officers with an unreadable expression. Martin knew Lisa well enough to understand what was going on. She wasn't just another driver. She was testing her team, evaluating how they handled situations like this. And from the looks of it, they had failed spectacularly. Lisa hadn't said a word since Martin arrived. She simply stood there, letting the weight of the moment fall squarely on the two officers. They had no idea who she was when they pulled her over. But now, standing in front of their deputy chief, they couldn't escape the truth any longer. Let me get this straight, Martin said, folding his arms. You pulled over a car for no apparent reason, asked a civilian to step out without giving her a proper explanation, and now you're suggesting you had cause to arrest her? James opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Grady was staring at the ground, as if hoping it would swallow him whole. Lisa finally spoke. Did you run my license, James? Officer James looked up, startled by the question. Well, we were in the middle of. That's a no, then, Lisa interrupted. You didn't even check who I was before pulling me over, did you? You saw a black woman in a car that you decided looked suspicious, and that was enough for you. Officer Grady shifted uncomfortably. It's not like that, Chief. Lisa cut him off with a raised hand. Let me guess, you thought I wouldn't question it. That I would just comply, no matter what you asked, right? There was a long silence. Neither officer could meet her gaze. Martin stepped forward with a stern voice. Do you know how serious this is? You've just harassed the chief of police under false pretenses. Do you understand what kind of damage this can do to the department's reputation? What kind of message it sends? Grady looked panicked, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to speak. We didn't know. I mean, we weren't trying to. Martin raised his hand, cutting him off. You weren't trying to what? Follow protocol? Respect the people you're supposed to protect and serve. James, trying to salvage the situation, blurted out, we just thought. No, Lisa replied. That's exactly the problem. You didn't think. You didn't follow procedure. You didn't treat me like a citizen of this town. Instead, you treated me like a suspect from the moment you saw me. The officers stood in silence, the weight of their actions pressing down on them. They had made a mistake, a big one, and there was no talking their way out of it. Martin looked at Lisa. What do you want to do? Lisa sighed, her gaze softening slightly, but the anger still simmered beneath the surface. She wasn't going to let them off easily, but she also understood the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her. It was about setting an example for the entire department. I'm not going to fire you, Lisa said. Both officers looked visibly relieved, but their relief was short-lived. But make no mistake, there will be consequences. She turned to Martin. I want them suspended, effective immediately, pending an internal investigation. They need to understand the gravity of what just happened here. This isn't about saving face or avoiding bad press. This is about justice, fair treatment, and making sure that something like this never happens again, not just to me but to anyone. Martin nodded. Consider it done. Lisa stepped closer to James and Grady, her eyes locking onto theirs. If you're going to wear that badge, you better earn it. Every single day. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.